The stars belong to everyone now. That was what the Galactic Council said anyway. 47 different species, all gathered together in a massive station that floated between solar systems. They made laws. They settled disputes. They tried to keep peace in a galaxy that was too big and too old for anyone to fully understand. Humans had been part of this council for 300 years. It seemed like a long time to the younger species, but some of the elder races remembered when Earth was just another primitive world with nuclear weapons and dreams of touching the stars. Those elder races had watched and waited. They did not interfere. That was the law. Let each species find its own way to the stars, or die trying. Humanity found its way. They built their ships and left their solar system, and eventually, they met the others. The first contact went better than anyone expected. Humans were curious, adaptable, and surprisingly good at learning alien languages. Within a century, human traders moved through galactic markets. Human explorers mapped unknown regions. Human diplomats sat in council chambers and argued for fair treatment of younger species. The other races had different opinions about humans. Some thought they were clever and useful. Others thought they were too emotional and unpredictable. But everyone agreed on one thing. Humans cared too much about weaker species. It was almost irrational how they protected primitive worlds and defended species that could not defend themselves. They are like worried parents, one alien ambassador once said, always protecting the children of the galaxy. Most species saw this as a weakness. Humans spent resources protecting worlds that gave them nothing in return. They enforced rules about not interfering with pre-spaceflight civilizations. They actually seemed to feel emotional pain when innocents suffered. It made no strategic sense to the older, colder races, but humanity had earned their place through hard work and clever diplomacy. They had a seat at the table. They had a vote. They had respect, even if some species thought they were too soft for the harsh reality of galactic politics. Then there were the Cathara. The Cathara Empire had existed for 2,000 years. They were reptilian, with scales that shifted from deep green to black depending on their mood. They stood taller than humans with powerful tails and claws that could tear through metal. Their eyes were cold and calculating. They believed in strength above all else. The Cathara had been expanding for centuries. They took what they wanted. They conquered weaker species. They annexed border worlds and stripped them of resources. The Galactic Council complained, but the Cathara were powerful. They had the second largest fleet in the galaxy. They had weapons that could crack planets. Most importantly, they did not care what anyone thought of them. Power is the only truth, their emperor declared. Everything else is just noise. The Cathara looked at humanity with barely hidden contempt. To them, humans were soft creatures who wasted time on useless compassion. The Cathara had studied human history. They knew about Earth's wars, the violence and conquest. They knew humans could be killers. But somewhere along the way to the stars, humans had changed. They chose diplomacy over warfare. They chose protection over conquest. The Cathara thought this made humans weak. Ambassador Sarah Chen represented humanity in the Galactic Council. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been a diplomat for 40 years. She had negotiated treaties, prevented wars, and saved countless lives through careful words and patient compromise. She also knew when compromise was impossible. The council chamber was enormous, built to accommodate species of every size and shape. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some communicated through sound, others through color changes or chemical signals. Universal translators made it possible for everyone to understand each other, though some meanings still got lost between species. The current debate had been going on for weeks. The Cathara were pushing into neutral space again. 3 systems, all rich in rare minerals, all claimed by the Empire through the simple logic of military occupation. These systems are not yours to take, Ambassador Chen said, her voice calm but firm. The translator carried her words to every species in the chamber. The Concordat of Civilized Species clearly states that neutral space must be claimed through proper survey and council approval. The Cathara ambassador was named Carvex. He was massive even for his species, with scars across his scales from a dozen wars. He looked at Chen the way a predator looks at something too small to eat. Humanity speaks of rules, Karvek said, his translator turning his hissing speech into flat, cold words. But rules only matter if someone can enforce them. Can you enforce these rules, little human? The chamber went quiet. Other ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. This was the kind of direct challenge that could spark conflicts. Chen did not blink. She had stared down bigger threats than Karvek's. The rules are enforced by the Council as a whole, she replied. No single species stands alone here. That is the point of this body. The point of this body, Karvek said, is to let weak species pretend they matter. The Cathara Empire takes what it needs. We grow stronger. The weak grow weaker or disappear. This is natural law. Natural law ended when we built starships, Chen said. Now we have laws we choose together. The Cathara Empire agreed to these laws when you joined this council. Karvex laughed. It was a horrible sound like stones grinding together. We agreed because it was convenient. It is no longer convenient. The Empire will expand. You cannot stop us with words, Ambassador Chen. And your precious humanity lacks the spine to stop us with anything else. Chen stood up slowly. Around her, other ambassadors watched carefully. Everyone knew human history. Everyone knew what humans had been before they became galactic citizens. Some species wondered if that violence still existed beneath the diplomatic surface. Withdraw from the neutral systems, Chen said quietly. Respect the boundaries we all agreed to. This is not a request. It is a warning. Karvex's scales darkened to pure black. Anger, in Cathara body language. Humanity does not make warnings, he said. Humanity makes negotiations and compromises. Humanity protects the weak and pleads for peace. You are not warriors anymore. You are shepherds, and shepherds do not frighten wolves. Chen held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. You are right about one thing, she said. We do protect the weak. Remember that. She sat down. The council moved to other business. The Cathara continued their expansion into the neutral systems. And across human space, fleet commanders received quiet orders to begin moving ships into new positions. Ambassador Chen filed her reports. She attended her meetings. She smiled at diplomatic functions. But those who knew her well noticed something different. Her smiles did not reach her eyes anymore. She seemed to be waiting for something. 3. Months later, the Cathara Empire discovered a world on the edge of human-protected space. It was a beautiful planet, rich in rare minerals, and it was inhabited by a peaceful species that had not yet developed spaceflight. The Cathara looked at the world and saw opportunity. They looked at the primitive inhabitants and saw tools. They looked at humanity's protection and saw weakness. They made their choice. The planet had been designated Kepler 442b by human astronomers centuries ago. The inhabitants called it something else in their own musical language. Humans simply called it the Lyran homeworld, after the species that lived there. The Lyran were beautiful in their simplicity. They stood about 4 feet tall with soft fur in shades of gold and silver. Their large eyes could see colors humans could not imagine. They lived in harmony with their world, building cities from living wood and stone. They had art, music, mathematics, and philosophy. They did not have electricity yet. They did not have radio. They did not know about the vast galaxy above their heads, but humanity knew about them. Human survey ships had found the Lyran 80 years ago. After careful study, the Interstellar Protection Bureau classified them as a protected species. Humanity placed monitoring satellites in orbit. They studied the Lyran from a distance, watching their culture develop naturally, never interfering. It was everything the younger species needed: time to grow, space to develop, protection from exploitation. The Cathara had different ideas about protection. Their scout ships found Kepler 442b while mapping human-protected space. The planet's scans showed exactly what the Empire needed: rare earth minerals in abundance, perfect atmospheric conditions for Cathara workers, and a convenient population of primitive aliens who could be put to use. The fact that humanity claimed protection over the world meant nothing to the Cathara. Humanity made claims they could not enforce. Humanity issued warnings they would not follow through on. Humanity was weak, The Cathara invasion fleet arrived without warning. 12 warships dropped out of FTL space directly above the Lyran homeworld. Human monitoring satellites detected them immediately and sent emergency signals. The nearest human patrol was 6 hours away at maximum speed. The Cathara did not wait 6 hours. Landing craft descended to the surface like a plague of metal insects. Cathara soldiers emerged in their battle armor, towering over the terrified Lyran. The first village they entered was celebrating a harvest festival. Families gathered together. Children played. Music filled the air. The music stopped when the Cathara arrived. The occupation began efficiently. Cathara soldiers rounded up Lyran families and separated them into groups. The strongest were sent to mining operations that the Empire was already constructing. The others were herded into camps. The Cathara commanders set up communication arrays and resource extraction facilities. Within 24 hours, they had fortified positions around the major Lyran population centers. Then they sent a message to the Galactic Council, the Cathara. Empire has claimed Kepler 442b under the right of superior development. The native population will be civilized and put to productive use. We will extract the planet's resources efficiently. This is now Imperial territory. The council chamber exploded into chaos. Dozens of species shouted at once. The Cathara had just violated the most sacred law of the Concordat. You do not interfere with primitive worlds. You do not conquer protected species. These rules existed for good reasons. They prevented exactly this kind of exploitation. Ambassador Chen did not shout. She stood calmly at her podium, her hands steady, her face blank. The Cathara Empire will withdraw all forces from Kepler 442b immediately, she said. Her voice cut through the chaos like a cold blade. You have 24 hours. Carvex appeared on the communication screen. Behind him, through the window of his flagship, the Lyran homeworld turned slowly in space. Or what? He asked. Will humanity issue another warning? Send another strongly worded message? The time for words is over, Ambassador Chen. This world belongs to the Empire now. Withdraw, Chen repeated. 24 hours. No, the connection ended. The council descended into arguments and emergency sessions. Some species called for sanctions. Others suggested negotiation. A few quietly pulled their representatives out of Cathara space, sensing something terrible coming. Humanity remained silent. Their ships continued moving into new positions. Their fleets gathered at rally points across human space, but they issued no threats. They made no public statements. They simply waited. 3 days after the invasion, the first reports began to reach Earth. Human intelligence operatives had agents on Cathara ships who leaked information. Stealth drones had infiltrated the occupation zones. What they discovered made hardened intelligence officers physically sick. The Cathara were not just using the Lyran as labor. They were experimenting on them. Cathara scientists saw the Lyran as perfect test subjects. They wanted to understand how different species responded to genetic modification. They wanted to test new biological weapons. They wanted to see what happened when you altered a species at the fundamental level. They started with the Lyran children. The leaked footage showed Lyran families being torn apart. Parents screaming as soldiers dragged their children away. The children crying for mothers and fathers they would never see again. Cathara scientists in sterile laboratories injecting substances into small bodies, recording the results with cold scientific interest. Some of the children survived the experiments. Some did not. None of them ever made it home to their families. When Ambassador Chen watched the footage, something inside her broke. Then something else, something colder and harder, took its place. The Galactic Council watched the same footage. Most species reacted with horror. A few, the older and colder species, simply looked away. This was the galaxy's harsh reality, they said. Terrible things happen to weak species. That was natural law, but humanity had stopped believing in natural law a long time ago. The Cathara Empire made one final mistake. They broadcast a message directly to Earth's government. Carvex appeared on every human news network simultaneously. Behind him, Lyran workers mined rare minerals under Cathara supervision. In the background, research facilities hummed with terrible purpose. Humanity coddles the weak, Carvex said. You waste resources protecting species that contribute nothing. We improve them. We make them useful. We give their existence meaning through service to superior beings. This is the way of the strong. If you disagree, stop us, he smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Oh, wait. You cannot. Because you are not strong anymore. You are soft. You are weak. You are nothing but shepherds protecting a flock that does not even know you exist. The age of human weakness is permanent. Accept it. The broadcast ended. In the council chambers, in fleet headquarters, in government offices across human space, a change occurred. It was subtle at first. Human representatives stopped arguing. They stopped negotiating. Their faces became blank, emotionless masks. They stopped talking about diplomacy and sanctions and peaceful solutions. They simply started giving orders. Ambassador. Chen returned to the council chamber exactly 24 hours after her first warning. The other ambassadors noticed the change immediately. She moved differently now. Her usual diplomatic warmth was gone. She looked like a completely different person. Carvex appeared on the communication screen again, still on his flagship above the Lyran homeworld. "Have you come to accept reality?" he asked mockingly. Chen looked at him with eyes like ice. "You were warned to withdraw within 24 hours, she said quietly. "That deadline has passed. You chose to ignore it. You chose to continue occupying a protected world. You chose to experiment on children to make a point. What will you do about it?" Carvex asked. Chen's expression did not change. "You are about to learn the difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight," she said. "You are about to learn why humanity protects the weak. And you're about to learn what we really are." "Empty threats," Carvex said. Chen shook her head slowly. "No threats. Just facts. We tried to coexist with you. We gave you warnings. We offered you every chance to step back from this edge. You chose to push forward. You chose to hurt innocents to prove your strength. That was your decision." She leaned forward slightly. "Now you face the consequences of that decision. What happens next is not revenge. It is not cruelty. It is simply what happens when you make humanity stop being patient. You wanted to see what we really are? You're about to find out." Carvex opened his mouth to respond. The communication screen went dark before he could speak. Across the galaxy, humanity's fleets received their final orders. 300 years of peaceful exploration ended in an instant. The sleeping giant opened its eyes, and the Cathara Empire, for the first time in its 2,000-year history, felt real fear. Hour 25 arrived like the end of the world. The Cathara Military Command was holding a celebration on their fortress station above their second-largest colony world. They were toasting their successful occupation of Kepler 442b and mocking humanity's weakness. Admiral Vortek raised a glass of synthetic wine and declared that the Empire had proven once and for all that humans were no threat. Then the fortress station's sensors detected something impossible. 20 human warships emerged from FTL space directly around the station. They did not hail. They did not demand surrender. They simply opened fire. The Cathara tried to respond. Their weapon systems activated. Their shields powered up. But the human ships were using weapons the Cathara had never seen before. Relativistic kill vehicles, launched at a fraction of light speed, turned the massive fortress into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The entire station, all 40,000 Cathara personnel, ceased to exist in less than 3 seconds, Admiral. Vortek did not even have time to lower his glass before he died. It was happening everywhere at once. Human fleets appeared at every Cathara military installation simultaneously. The coordination was perfect. The timing was impossible. The Cathara had the second-largest fleet in the galaxy, but they were scattered across their empire. Humanity hit them everywhere at the same moment, using FTL jump technology that should not exist. Cathara orbital defense platforms vanished in nuclear fire. Cathara shipyards, some of them a century old, dissolved under directed energy weapons. Cathara comm arrays went dark as cyber attacks crashed every system simultaneously. Within the first hour of the attack, the Cathara Empire lost 30% of its military capability, and humanity was just getting started. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species watched the sensor data in stunned silence. The elder races, who had seen thousands of wars, could not believe what they were witnessing. Humanity was not just attacking. They were executing the most precise, most devastating military operation in galactic history. "They have been planning this," whispered the Zorgothi ambassador, a species known for their military expertise. "For how long?" Nobody had an answer. Humanity had seemed peaceful for 300 years. They had been traders, explorers, and diplomats. Where had this military capability come from? The truth was simpler and more terrifying than anyone realized. Humanity had never stopped being warriors. They had just chosen to hide that part of themselves. Every peaceful trade ship had been designed with military conversion in mind. Every exploration vessel carried weapons that had never been activated. Every human colony had hidden military installations. For 300 years, humanity had built a war machine in complete secret, hoping they would never need to use it. Now they were using all of it at once. Above Kepler 442b, Carvex watched his sensors with growing horror. Human ships were dropping out of FTL by the dozens. They formed a perfect blockade around the planet. The Cathara occupation fleet was powerful. 12 heavy warships against what appeared to be 30 human vessels. Open fire, Carvex ordered. Destroy them! The Cathara fleet fired everything they had. Energy weapons capable of melting cities, missiles with nuclear warheads, kinetic kill vehicles. It was enough firepower to conquer a solar system. The human ships did not even slow down. Their shields absorbed the Cathara weapons like rain hitting an ocean. Then they returned fire. Cathara warships exploded one after another. The humans were not trying to disable or capture. They were executing. Within minutes, 11 of the 12 Cathara ships were debris fields. Only Carvex's flagship remained. And only because the humans wanted it intact. A communication channel opened. Ambassador Chen appeared on the screen. She was no longer in the council chambers. She stood on the bridge of a human warship, wearing a military uniform that looked like it had been waiting in a closet for 300 years. Carvex, she said calmly. Watch. The planet's surface showed on the tactical display. Cathara forces were dug into defensive positions around mining operations and Lyran population centers. They had shields, automated weapons, and fortified bunkers. They were ready for an invasion, but the humans did not invade. Massive transport ships entered the atmosphere directly above Lyran cities. They deployed a technology the Cathara had never seen before. Teleportation. Individual Lyran families vanished from their homes and appeared inside the human ships. The humans were extracting every single Lyran from the planet, pulling them away from Cathara positions faster than the Empire forces could respond. Cathara soldiers tried to use Lyran hostages as shields. The humans teleported the hostages away and left the Cathara standing alone. Within 3 hours, every Lyran on the planet was safe aboard human evacuation ships. Then the human Marines arrived. They did not teleport. They dropped from orbit in armored pods, impacting the ground like meteor strikes. The pods opened and soldiers emerged. They wore powered armor that made them faster and stronger than any Cathara. They carried weapons that fired rounds capable of penetrating Cathara battle armor. The Cathara had numerical advantage. They had fortified positions. They had military training spanning centuries of conquest. None of it mattered. The human Marines moved through Cathara defensive lines like they were made of paper. They fought with a cold efficiency that terrified even the Cathara commanders. One Marine unit encountered a Cathara bunker complex that held 500 soldiers. The Cathara expected a siege. Instead, the Marines deployed something called a nano-disassembler. The bunker wall simply dissolved, molecule by molecule, in less than a minute. The Cathara soldiers inside surrendered immediately. Carvex watched it all from his dying flagship. His shields were failing. His weapons were offline. Human ships surrounded him like predators circling wounded prey. Surrender, Chen said from the communication screen. Order all Cathara forces to stand down. Why? Carvex asked. His voice was no longer mocking. He sounded like someone who finally understood they had made a terrible mistake. So you can capture us? Put us on trial? Chen shook her head. No. So we can give your soldiers one chance to die quickly instead of slowly. The ones who surrender now will be executed painlessly. The ones who keep fighting will face weapons they cannot imagine. Make your choice, Carvex stared at her. This was not the same human who had argued in council chambers. This was something else. Something ancient and terrible that had been hiding behind diplomatic masks. You cannot just execute prisoners, he said weakly. The council laws do not apply to species that torture children, Chen interrupted. You wanted to see humanity's true nature? Congratulations. You succeeded. We are exactly what we appear to be. We protect the weak. We value compassion. We choose peace whenever possible. But we are also the descendants of apex predators who hunted megafauna with sharpened rocks. We are the species that looked at the atom and split it. We are the species that turned our own planet into a nuclear wasteland twice before we learned to control ourselves. She leaned closer to the screen. We choose to be gentle. We choose to be kind. But when you force us to choose between kindness and protecting innocence, we will always choose protecting innocence, every single time, and we will do whatever it takes. Carvex's scales had turned completely white. Fear in Cathara body language. Humanity tried to coexist with you, Chen continued. We gave you warnings. We offered you every chance to step back. You chose to ignore all of it. You chose to hurt children to prove your strength. That was when you stopped being an opponent and became something else, something that needs to be removed. What are you saying? Carvex whispered. Chen's expression was ice. I am saying that the Cathara Empire no longer has a future. We are going to dismantle everything you built. We are going to ensure you never hurt anyone again. And we are going to make sure every species in this galaxy understands one simple fact. There are lines you do not cross. You crossed all of them. The communication screen went dark. Carvex sat alone on his ruined flagship as human boarding parties cut through the hull. He had time for one final thought before the Marines reached the bridge. The humans had never been weak. They had been waiting, and the Cathara had given them a reason to stop waiting. The Cathara Emperor's name was Zarkoth the Eternal. He had ruled for 90 years and conquered 16 species. His throne room was decorated with trophies from 1,000 battles. He had never known defeat. He knew it now. His military advisors stood before him with white scales. Every report was worse than the last. The human offensive had continued for exactly 1 week. In that time, the Cathara Empire had lost 60% of its fleet, all of its orbital installations, and military control of every conquered world. We must sue for peace, his chief advisor said. We must negotiate terms before they destroy everything. Emperor Zarkoth had no choice. His pride had led the empire to disaster. Now he had to salvage what remained. He sent a formal message to humanity's military command. It was a standard diplomatic communication offering unconditional surrender. He offered to withdraw from all disputed territories. He offered to pay reparations. He offered to put the officers responsible for Kepler 442b on trial. Everything the humans could possibly want. The response came from Admiral Marcus Webb, commander of humanity's combined fleets. He was an old man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. He appeared on the communication screen wearing a simple uniform with no decorations. He did not need decorations. Everyone in the galaxy knew who he was now. No, Webb said simply. Zarkoth stared at the screen. I do not understand. We surrender. We accept all terms. What more do you want? We want you to understand what you did, Webb said. You tortured children to make a point. You hurt innocents to prove your strength. You took our mercy as weakness and our restraint as inability. You forced us to become something we did not want to be. Then take your victory, Zarkoth said desperately. Occupy our worlds. Dismantle our military. Install your own government. But let the Cathara people survive. Webb shook his head slowly. No. The Cathara Empire ends today. Not just your government. Not just your military. All of it. You wanted to be conquerors. You wanted to be the strong who prey on the weak. You made your choice. Now you live with the consequences. The communication ended. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. This time they were not debating sanctions or negotiations. They were watching humanity do something no species had ever done in galactic history. They were watching a complete and systematic extinction of another spacefaring race. They cannot do this, the Zorgathi ambassador protested. Even if the Cathara committed atrocities, you cannot erase an entire species. This is genocide. Ambassador Chen stood at the human podium. She looked tired but determined. The Cathara will not be killed, she said. They will be given a choice. Sterilization or exile. Either way, they end as a spacefaring civilization. Either way, they never hurt anyone again. This is barbaric, another ambassador shouted. Torturing children is barbaric, Chen replied coldly. Using innocents as test subjects is barbaric. Broadcasting your atrocities to mock us is barbaric. We are simply ensuring it never happens again. The council must vote on this, the Zorgathi said. We must decide together if— No, Chen interrupted. This is not a council matter anymore. This is humanity's decision. You can vote to sanction us afterward if you want. You can expel us from the council. You can declare us criminals. But the Cathara Empire ends today regardless of what you decide. The council chamber fell silent. They were watching humanity reveal its true nature, not the peaceful explorers or clever diplomats. The apex predator that had decided to stop pretending. Human forces moved through Cathara space systematically. They occupied every Cathara world simultaneously. They deployed ground forces in overwhelming numbers. Resistance was met with immediate and devastating response. Surrender was met with cold efficiency. Cathara citizens were gathered in designated areas. They were given the choice, sterilization or exile. Most chose sterilization. They would be allowed to live out their natural lives on their homeworld, under human occupation. But they would have no children. Within 100 years, the species would die of old age. Some chose exile. They were transported to a barren moon in an isolated system. The moon had atmosphere, water, and basic resources. It could support life, but it had no rare minerals, no strategic value, and no way to build ships capable of leaving. The Cathara who went there would survive, but they would be prisoners on their own world forever. Human ships established a permanent blockade around the exile moon. Automated defense platforms ensured nothing could leave or enter without permission. The Cathara exiles would live, but they would never touch the stars again. The Cathara military tried to resist. Some units refused to surrender and fought to the death. Humanity gave them death. Other units fled into neutral space, hoping to escape. Humanity hunted them down with frightening efficiency. One Cathara battle group tried to hide in an asteroid field on the edge of known space. They powered down all systems and hoped humanity's sensors would not find them. For 2 weeks they hid in the cold dark between stars. Then human ships arrived. The human commander sent a simple message. We can wait as long as you can. But eventually you will run out of food, water, and air. Surrender now and die quickly. Keep hiding and die slowly. Your choice. The Cathara battle group surrendered. Throughout the occupation, humanity maintained perfect discipline. There were no atrocities. No revenge killings. No torture. Human soldiers were professional and efficient. Cathara citizens who cooperated were treated with basic decency. Those who resisted were eliminated quickly and cleanly. It was the cold efficiency of it that terrified the watching galaxy most of all. This was not hatred or rage. This was calculated removal of a threat. Emperor Zarkoth watched his empire collapse from his palace on the Cathara homeworld. Human marines had occupied the capital city without firing a shot. The emperor's guards had simply surrendered. Now Zarkoth sat on his throne and waited. Admiral Webb arrived personally. He walked into the throne room with 2 marines as escorts. He looked at the trophies on the walls, the conquered worlds and defeated species. He showed no emotion. You could have had peace, Webb said quietly. Humanity asked for nothing but coexistence. We protected the weak, yes, but we never threatened you. We never attacked you. We gave you every chance to be our equals. You chose to be our enemies instead. We were strong, Zarkoth said bitterly. We thought strength was enough. Strength is never enough, Webb replied. You need wisdom too. You need restraint. You need to understand that just because you can do something does not mean you should. Will you kill me? Zarkoth asked. No, you will be tried for war crimes by an interspecies tribunal. You will face justice for what you ordered done on Kepler 442b. But you will live to see what happens to your empire. Webb turned to leave, then stopped. Your species had 2,000 years of history. 2,000 years of conquest and glory and power. It ends because you chose to hurt children to make a point. Think about that. Think about whether it was worth it. He left. The emperor sat alone on his throne, ruler of nothing. 6 months after the war began, the Cathara Empire ceased to exist. Their fleet was destroyed or captured. Their colonies were occupied. Their technology was confiscated. Their government was dissolved. The species itself was slowly dying, either through sterilization or imprisonment on a barren moon. The galaxy watched it all happen with growing horror and respect. Humanity had not just defeated the Cathara, they had erased them from history, and they had done it with such perfect efficiency that every other species suddenly understood why humanity had been so adamant about protecting the weak. Because when you forced humanity to stop protecting, they became something far more terrifying. They became the galaxy's apex predator, and they showed no mercy to those who threatened their protected species. Ambassador Chen returned to the council chambers. She looked older now, as if the weight of what humanity had done aged her years in just months. She stood at the human podium and addressed the assembled species. "Let this be the last time," she said quietly. "Let this be the last time any species needs to learn this lesson. Humanity tried peace. We tried diplomacy. We tried coexistence. When you respond to that with atrocities, you leave us no choice. We will always protect the innocent. Always. And we will remove any threat to them completely and permanently." No one argued. No one protested. They had all seen what happened to the last species that made humanity stop being patient. 50 years later, the galaxy was a different place. The Galactic Council still met in the same massive station between stars. The same species still gathered to debate laws and settle disputes. But the atmosphere had changed. There was a new understanding now, a new respect for humanity that came from fear as much as admiration. The humans had returned to their peaceful ways. They traded, explored, and negotiated just like before. But everyone remembered what they could become when provoked. Everyone remembered the Cathara. Young aliens learned about the Cathara extinction in their history classes. Teachers told the story carefully, making sure students understood the lesson. The Cathara had been strong and proud. They had conquered 16 species and ruled for 2,000 years, but they made one fatal mistake. They hurt humanity's protected species, and humanity erased them from existence. Never forget, the teachers said. Power without wisdom leads to destruction. And never ever harm those under humanity's protection. The phrase entered common galactic language. Anger a human and you might survive. Anger humanity and your species becomes history. Ambassador Chen had retired years ago. She was 87 years old now, living quietly on a colony world at the edge of human space. She spent her days teaching young diplomats and writing about the lessons she had learned in 300 years of galactic politics. A young reporter came to interview her one day. He was human, fresh out of journalism school and eager to understand the events he had only read about in history books. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "What happened to the Cathara?" Chen was quiet for a long time. She sat on her porch looking at the alien sunset of her adopted world. Finally she spoke. "Every day," she said, "we did not want to become executioners. We tried everything else first. But when you watch footage of children being experimented on, when you see innocents suffering just to prove a point, you realize some evils require absolute responses. The Cathara would not stop. They would never stop. So we stopped them permanently." "But complete extinction," the reporter said. "That seems extreme." Chen turned to look at him. "Let me ask you something. If a species proved they would torture children to make political points, that they would use innocents as weapons, that they would never change no matter what you tried, what would you do? Give them another chance? Hope they learned their lesson? Wait for them to hurt more people?" The reporter had no answer. "We made a choice," Chen continued. "It was the hardest choice humanity ever made. But we made it clearly and consciously. Some evils you cannot negotiate with, some threats you cannot contain. The Cathara proved they were one of those threats, so we removed them. Not with rage or hatred, but with cold calculation. And yes, I regret that we had to do it, but I do not regret that we did it." She looked back at the sunset. "The galaxy is safer now. Protected species develop in peace. No one tests humanity's patience anymore. The price was high, but the alternative was worse. We could have let the Cathara continue. We could have saved ourselves from moral burden, but more innocents would have suffered. More children would have been hurt. So we chose to bear that burden ourselves. On Kepler 442b, the Lyran civilization had flourished. With humanity's help but not interference, they had developed their technology naturally. They had discovered electricity, radio, and eventually spaceflight. 50 years after their rescue, they launched their first faster-than-light ship. The Lyran delegation arrived at the Galactic Council to thunderous applause. They were the first species to join the Council after being rescued from annihilation. Their presence was a symbol of everything humanity had fought to protect. The Lyran ambassador's name was Kira. She was young and nervous, speaking to the assembled species for the first time. "My people almost died before we could reach the stars," she said. "We would have been slaves at best, test subjects at worst. But humanity saved us. They gave us time to grow, space to develop, and protection when we needed it most." She looked at the human delegation. "We learned that the strong have two choices: They can use their strength to conquer the weak, or they can use it to protect them. Humanity chose protection. And when someone tried to destroy what they protected, humanity showed why predators sometimes choose to be gentle, not because they lack the ability to kill, but because they understand the responsibility that comes with power. The council chamber was silent. The Lyran were living proof that humanity's actions had meaning beyond simple revenge. The Cathara believed strength meant taking what you wanted. Kira continued. They believed the weak existed to serve the strong. They were wrong. Real strength is using your power to help others grow. Real strength is defending those who cannot defend themselves. Real strength is choosing mercy but being capable of war. She paused. Humanity taught us all these lessons, at a terrible cost to themselves and to others. I hope their sacrifice means other species will learn without repeating the Cathara's mistakes. The exile moon still existed, orbiting a distant star that appeared on no trade routes. 3 million Cathara lived there now. They had built a civilization from scratch, farming the barren soil and mining resources to build simple cities. They had art, music, and culture. They had everything except freedom. Human monitoring stations watched the moon constantly. Defense platforms ensured nothing left the surface. The Cathara exiles could live, but they could never leave. They were the last of their species, growing old on a prison world they could never escape. An old Cathara named Telvok sat outside his simple house and watched the stars. He had been a soldier once. He had fought in the war against humanity and survived only by surrendering immediately. Now he was 70 years old and approaching the end of his life. Young Cathara came to him sometimes, asking about the old empire. They had been born on the exile moon. They had never seen Cathara homeworld or known the glory days. They only knew stories. Tell us about the empire, a young female asked. Tell us about when we were strong. Telvok looked at her sadly. We were never strong, he said. We thought we were. We conquered worlds and defeated enemies and built a mighty fleet. But real strength is something else. Real strength is knowing when not to fight. Real strength is having power and choosing not to misuse it. But humanity destroyed us, the young one protested. How is that strength? Humanity tried every other option first, Telvok replied. They offered peace. They gave warnings. They negotiated for decades. We kept pushing. We kept taking. We thought their restraint was weakness. We were wrong. He pointed at the stars. Up there, dozens of species live in peace. They trade, explore, and build together. They could be warriors, but they choose to be builders instead. That is strength. We chose to be conquerors. We chose to hurt the innocent. We chose to ignore every warning. And we paid the price. Do you hate them? The young one asked. The humans? Telvok shook his head. I hate what we became. I hate that we forced them to destroy us. But hate them? No, they did what needed to be done. They showed the galaxy that some lines cannot be crossed. We crossed those lines. This moon, our exile, our slow extinction, it is the consequence of our own choices. He looked at the young Cathara. Remember that. Tell your children. Tell everyone. The Cathara Empire fell because we believed strength meant domination. Real strength means protection. We learned that lesson too late. Maybe others can learn it in time. In the council chambers, a new species was debating their first major policy decision. They were aggressive and confident, a younger race that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. They wanted to expand into disputed territories. They wanted to claim worlds that other species had surveyed first. Their ambassador spoke boldly. We are strong enough to take what we need. The old rules do not apply to... He stopped. Every species in the chamber was staring at him. The human delegation had not moved. Ambassador Williams, Chen's successor, simply sat at the human podium with a calm expression. But the other species understood the warning. They had all seen the historical records. They knew what happened when someone pushed too far. The young ambassador cleared his throat. Nervously, perhaps we should discuss this matter through proper diplomatic channels, he said quietly. Ambassador, Williams nodded slightly. That would be wise. Later in private, the young ambassador met with his own government officials. Are the humans really that dangerous? He asked. The stories seem exaggerated. An older official pulled up historical records, footage of Cathara worlds being occupied, images of the exile moon, records of a 2,000-year-old empire erased in 6 months. The stories are not exaggerated, the official said. If anything, they do not capture the full horror. Humanity is patient and kind until you hurt innocence. Then they become something else. Something ancient and terrible that we should never wake up. What should we do? Follow the rules. Respect protected species. Never ever test humanity's patience. They gave us all a gift with the Cathara. They showed us exactly where the line is. Do not cross it. Ambassador Williams sat in his office after the council session, reviewing reports from across human space. Everything was peaceful. Trade was booming. Diplomatic relations were strong. Protected species were developing naturally under humanity's watchful guard.